Many of you Americans heard about Russian sleep experiment, and some of you might thought that it might have been just a campfire scary story that never happened. Well, I cannot confirm or deny whether such experiment took place, but I can confirm that there was one that did happen, and it was very recent and very terrifying, and it is still sort of going on. I say sort of because we don't know what happened to the subject. It all began in 2014 after glorious liberation of Crimea. President was very concerned about NATO invading the motherland, and he wanted solutions. Little bit about myself. I am an operative of a CSNFSB, also known as Alpha. It's FSB Special Forces. I usually spend my time hunting down terrorists that threaten Russia. Enough about myself. ND Directorate of FSB offered a solution: a super soldier. There was a crazy scientist in the 3rd Directorate that said that he can make him an army of super soldiers that will defeat any threat. We all laughed at him at the time, calling him a universal soldier, but he insisted and was able to score a huge grant. I wish I knew what was coming so I could shoot him right in his forehead. But at the time of our country being threatened by NATO, our political leadership were willing to spend money on anything, especially if it meant winning wars. I was detailed as a security manager for this project. While I was in Moscow, I kept going to coordination meetings. They were top secret, only few people knew. Only the director, chief of FSB, and the president knew about it. I was able to get my friend Sergei out of Syria and making him my deputy. He was briefed on everything and agreed to participate. The first thing first, we needed subjects. Of course, no one would want to volunteer for something like that. And plus, we couldn't ask for volunteers because the operation was inherently clandestine. I sat down with my buddy Sergei, and we figured out a plan how to get ourselves some subjects off the books. We were going to go to penal colony that held terrorists, and what we're just going to buy one. Meaning being warden a fake prisoner's death and then picking him up. We found a prison just outside of Moscow. It was about 3-hour drive. We grabbed our minivan and started driving. We researched warden's file before going over there. One corrupt bastard he was. He was even nearly fired one time for suspicion of releasing prisoners for a hefty sum of money. Most of them were mafia guys, but now the prison was converted into a colony that had terrorist suspects in it. In Russia, terrorists is a less than human being, so nobody would cry out about disappearance of one, especially if paperwork is straight. I gave warden a call prior to our arrival. We had a suitcase full of money for all of the expenses. We were going to meet at the restaurant where we were discuss the price and some details. After 3-hour drive, we finally arrived at the restaurant. The greedy bastard was already there. There was a bottle of expensive vodka sitting on the table. He really wanted the money. He was a man, and he's late 50s, bold and overweight. What early signs of cirrhosis. We started off talking about cars as he was a huge car enthusiast. He pointed his Bentley sitting outside, and he said he wanted another one. The warden got really drunk and accepted our proposal for $70. $30. 0.0000 less than we expected. Me and Sergey split the difference. He will make a nice present for wife. He told us about a one terrorist, but a suspect he wants to get rid of. He said that he's very influential on other prisoners, and he converted many prisoners into Islam. The warden didn't like that very much, as he told us he was devoted Orthodox Christian. He was about as Orthodox Christian as I was an extraterrestrial. We stayed in the hotel that night. It would take a couple of days for him to get things ready and pay off the right people to keep quiet, mainly in the coroner. The warden was supposed to call us. When it was all set, all we had to do is just come and pick him up. The coroner was going to roll him out after the prisoner got sedated, making it look like he died to the guards in case there's any questions later from his family or whatever. As far as they will know, he is already dead. Like I said, terrorists are not considered to be people in Russia. The next day we got a phone call. It was warden. He said that we need to meet the coroner at the back gate of the prison, where he would turn over prisoner to us. Everything went smooth. We simply drove up and picked the guy up. He was completely knocked out by whatever coroner gave him. He told us he should last about 2 to 3 hours. I called my boss to inform him that we got the package and that we are ready for the next phase. My boss emailed me a special pass that would get me through a gate of a secret FSB airfield. It was about 2-hour drive from where we were. We were to drive over there, load the subject, and escort them to a secret facility. The drive was uneventful, was knocked out the whole time. We drove up to the gate of the airfield. There was an FSB officer guarding it. I showed him the pass, and he let us through. There was an IL waiting for us on the tarmac. We were the only passengers. We rolled the guy inside the plane and tied him up to a bench. My boss didn't give me any more instructions, so we were assuming somebody was going to meet us on the other end. I gave him a call before we loaded, telling him that we were about to go. He just acknowledged it and hung up the phone. We didn't really know where we were going, but judging my plane, it was far, like really far. I walked over to a cockpit and asked the pilot if he knew where we were headed. He said we were going to city of Odakny in Yakutia. If you don't know, it's ultra-remote area even for Russia, covered with northern forests and tundras. There was only one big city in Yakutia, and by big I mean maybe 300,000 people. Rest were small mining towns and temporary nomadic settlements. Yakutia is 3 times smaller than United States, but with 100 times less population, so you can imagine the vastness of this region. It was mostly unpopulated, and many places in Yakutia never seen a human being. Like I said before, Yakutia is mostly taiga or tundra. There is a beautiful river called Lena that runs through it. There is some mountains and volcanoes as well. We landed in Yakutsk International Airport. There was a van waiting for us right on the tarmac. To my surprise, the package didn't wake up the whole time. When we landed, he finally did. He started asking questions. "Where am I?" he asked. "Shut your mouth. You aren't allowed to talk," Sergey told him and smacked him in his head. The guy was terrified. He had no clue what is happening to him. He was just staring at the ramp of slowly coming down. "Where are you taking me?" he asked again. He looked like he was about to break down crying. Sergey hit him on the back of his head, knocking him out. "Damn it, Sergey. Why did you do that? Now you'll have to carry him." I told him, okay, I will carry this piece of shit." Sergey picked him up on his shoulder and walked him to the van waiting for us outside. The driver had a blacked out glass between us and him, so we just offloaded the package and knocked on it, letting him know to get going. It was February in Yucatán, and it was absolutely freezing cold. It was so cold I started having icicles on my eyebrows after being outside for maybe 2 or 3 minutes. Luckily, it was nice and warm inside the van. Know how long the ride was going to be? The ride ended up being 8 hours. During 8 hours, the prisoner woke up. To be quite honest, I didn't see a hardcore terrorist. The warden said he was. I saw a terrified kid in his mid-to-20s. I asked him what his name was. He said his name was Muhammad, and that he's a native of Dagestan. He was snatched at night by Russian National Guard and thrown in jail. As he was talking, Sergey elbowed me in the stomach and reminded Muhammad not to speak. He had a point. We didn't know what was going to happen to this kid. Last thing you want to do is create some kind of an emotional attachment. We sat there quiet the whole time, wholly no cell phone signal, and we weren't given a satellite phone. It started to feel lonely and isolated. Finally, we arrived. It was about midday. Driver pulled up to some gate at the very end of a gravel road. He then turned around, facing the back door towards the gate so he doesn't see us. We picked up Muhammad and went up to the gate. As soon as we and our stuff was offloaded from the van, the driver sped away. The gate opened up. The scientist I was talking about earlier, Dr. Frolov, was standing there. He told us to hurry up and get them inside the house. It was miserably cold, with a snowstorm rolling in within next hour or so. We went inside the building. The building itself looked like it was built in the 30s. It was made out of solid red brick, which was rather strange for the area. Most of the houses here were wooden. The building was completely ran out on the outside, but you could see where windows blocked by center blocks covered with cement. It looked like it was done pretty recently. There was a generator running on the outside, a huge thing in industrial caterpillar type. Right next to it was a fuel tank. It was huge as well. We went inside the building, and it looked a little better inside. You could tell whatever grant money the scientist got, he didn't steal. It was fairly modern with outlets and cameras all over the place. Dr. Frolov told us to take Muhammad to what he called an isolator. We took him in there and uncuffed him. There was a bed there, and that's about it. Muhammad looked at me with sheer terror in his eyes. I started to feel bad for him, but I had to remind myself that he was terrorist. Muhammad started crying, asking us what we're going to do to him. Hell, even if I knew, I wouldn't tell him, but I really did not know. We locked the door and walked over to Dr. Frolov's office. He had a bunch of screens from different angles watching Muhammad. "Okay, you two sit down," he said. "What you need to know about what we're about to do here is what I'm doing is in the interest of national security, protecting our motherland from Western invaders. I believe in what I'm doing. Do you? He looked at both of us, expecting an answer. We both do, I said. Otherwise we wouldn't be here. Good, he said. Then I can explain you what we're about to do here. The terrorist piece of trash that you see in the screens will receive a daily injection of a classified stimulant. It will keep him up for days, maybe weeks, or maybe even longer. He will go through multiple stages of sleep deprivation. In about 2 to 3 weeks, I expect that his physical body dies. And then she will be reborn, but he will be different. I can program him to do things that no human can possibly do. Sure, I do that. I will CAT scan his brain. I need a good baseline for my research. Just so you remember, there's only 6 people know about this. The President, Chief of FSB, Chief of 3rd Directorate, and you two. Do you understand? I thought them. This guy makes me extremely uncomfortable, and everything he's about to do sounds pretty brutal. I told Dr. Frolov that I understand and will carry out whatever he needed. I also told him he won't have any issues with us. We're both professional FSB officers with years of combat experience. He nodded. Okay, we will start tomorrow morning. Let subject sleep tonight. It will be his last night. Somebody had to guard Mohammed, so me and Sergei decided to split 12-hour shifts. There was something off about this whole situation. He basically was going to kill the guy. There's no way a brain can survive that kind of abuse. And besides, this is some stuff Nazis used to do to Jewish people. And we do not like Nazis. My grandfather fought them and died while he was doing that. We will see where it goes. Mohammed peacefully slept on his bed. When it's 6:00 in the morning, Dr. Frolov woke me up and told him I need to help him with injecting the subject. He walked in a room. Mohammed was still sleeping. He told me to hold him down while he was injecting him with a stimulant. Mohammed tried to resist, but he was too scrawny and weak to do anything about it. He got injected. He kept asking what we injected him with. I just told him not to worry about it and that it was medicine. I went to sleep after I got relieved by Sergei. She was not in a good mood, and I was afraid he's going to start using physical violence against Mohammed. I woke up and went to get some food in the kitchen. The kitchen was fully stocked with pretty much everything we need. There was also a freezing room full of meats and other stuff. I went to relieve Sergei and asked him how subject was doing. Sergei smiled at me and told me that unfortunately he was still alive. I smacked at him and sat down on the chair. I could see Mohammed in the CCTV footage. He was still fine, he was just praying. For next 12 hours I get to watch him and give him another dose in the morning. What does it always have to be me? Prayed few more times, and then he just sat it on the bed. I could tell through the camera that he was sobbing and crying and then praying again. I could only imagine what was going through his head. But I couldn't help him. Otherwise, I would end up in the room with him. She finally laid down, but he kept getting up. This stimulant started to work. He kept pacing back and forth, back and forth. He said down again. He got down on his knees and prayed some more. That went on for 12 hours of my shift. I finally got relieved by Sergei in the morning. To my surprise, I didn't have to administer the dose. Sergey was going to do that. I was just there for backup. Both Dr. Frolov and Sergey walked in a room. In Muhammad down, and then Jeff at him again. As they were walking away, Muhammad was just laying there on the floor crying. It was no terrorist. Just another kid that was just rolled up for no reason, just to show the government Russian National Guard is fighting terrorism. I was going to pay visit to Warden after this thing was over. There were plenty of hardcore terrorists in that prison. Why did have to give us this kid? I want to sleep and repeat it routine again. Food back to the screens. This was a second day of Muhammad not sleeping. I could tell he was trying to, but he couldn't. Then he just couldn't tell what was going on. But at this point, he should have been already suspecting that the reason he's not sleeping is because of the daily injections. She kept doing the same thing, basing the room, and then getting on his knees to pray. What a strong man he is, I thought. I couldn't even imagine what I would do if I was in his shoes. But he was so calm and hopeful, and he kept asking God for forgiveness for whatever he did. It's almost like he knew that this was the end of him. Nothing special happened that night. I got relief by Sergey and I'm to bed. I didn't see Dr. Frolov and Sergey injecting him this time. Be quiet, Frank, I couldn't look at it. All I heard is Seam screaming again, begging for them to stop. During my next shift, I noticed was sitting there and talking to somebody. There was nobody in a room, just him. I figured he was having hallucinations. I had those myself a few times, but I never really went beyond those. Muhammad kept laying down trying to sleep, but he couldn't. He would get up again and get on his knees and pray. Then he finally lay down on the bed, and he finally laid on the bed and started moving his hands like he was touching something. Morning, the doctor had me escort him into the room to administer another injection. Muhammad didn't resist it. To my surprise, he just laid there. He didn't have any more energy. He gave up. I went back to sleep thinking about morality of what we're doing here. I even started crying, feeling bad for the kid. I woke up and I spent another 12 hours watching him. At this point, he was just standing there looking at the wall. You could tell he was going insane. Dr. Frollo finally walked in. Usually, he walked in and told me did not let him pray. Why not? I said, because I said so. And you don't ask me and you goddamn questions. You do as you're told. I was boiling inside from condescending attitude of this guy. I just wanted to pull out my gun and shoot him right in the face and let the kid go, but I swallowed it. But I let him pray anyways. Knowing that he's going to die, he needed to connect to God. But at this point, he wasn't praying anymore anyways. He just sat on the bed, rocking from side to side, crying, having conversation with somebody who is not there. It was brutal to watch. I couldn't believe I agreed to this. Next several nights, he just laid there without moving. Occasionally he would get up and pace. I have another conversation, and then he would lay back down. I'm not entirely sure how long he was going to be awake, for Dr. Frollo wasn't talking much about it, so it was mystery from both me and Sergey. It's been over a week now, maybe about 11 days. The next night, I was manning my post while Sergey walked in on me. He was drunk, really drunk. He sat down on the chair right next to me and was trying to start a conversation. Why don't I just walk in there and shoot him right in his head? I told him that wasn't the job. I don't care what job is. Why are we sitting here and watching this guy? It's people like him that used to kill my comrades in church. Now why should I let him live? I told him that he should go back to his room and go to sleep. He told me, listen, Commander, I don't want to be here anymore. I just want to go back home. So let's just go end it right now. Sergei then started crying. He kept saying, I need to go home. I just want to home. To be quite honest, it's been 2 weeks since we both saw sunlight. I didn't tell anything to Dr. Frolov, but literally next day he had us switch shifts. I was now up with him during a day, which I didn't really like, because I didn't like him at all. At this point, Muhammad wasn't even responsive. He wasn't eating his food. You could tell that his body began to shut down. He was just laying there on the bed and talking. I couldn't really understand what he was saying. He was speaking a language I never heard before. I thought it was a local Dagestani language called Avar, but it was not that. Well, after all, it's been 2 weeks of him not sleeping, so he is probably matching words and letters. So maybe that what was happening. In about 3 days, he stopped moving. Dr. Frolov was pacing back and forth, looking at him. I think he is dead. Doctor, he is not dead. He is undergoing transformation now. We administered another dose. His eyes were open, but doctor checked his vitals, and he was still alive. He detected a faint heartbeat that went on for a few more days. I lost count, to be perfectly honest. He was laying there motionless. The stimulant was not doing anything anymore. He visibly lost at least 20 kilograms at that point, and he looked like a skeleton. But somehow he was still alive. Next day, me and doctor went in to do another dose. I wasn't pinning him down anymore. A sit was pointless. Suddenly, Muhammad grabbed doctor's hand. Dr. Frolov screamed from pain. Muhammad was just laying there looking at him with his eyes wide open, and then he looked at me with the creepiest smile I ever saw. I had chills run down my spine. The Muhammad let go and laid his head back on the pillow. His eyes were wide open. Dr. Frolov jumped back. He said, okay, good, good. It was earlier than I thought. He walked out without giving a dose. He walked out of the room and showed me his wrist. It was completely blue and bruised up, like a RoboCop squeezed his wrist for about an hour. Doctor was in pain, but I kind of felt good on the inside. Finally, he got what he deserved. He sat on the chair and swallowed some painkillers. He told me he was going to lay down. I told him, okay, just as long you are not in my sight. I sat back down and kept watching him. He was laying on the bed completely motionless. He was gone in a vegetable state. I was thinking his brain is dead. It's just a body now. That went on for another 2 weeks. Muhammad was soiling himself as he was laying there, and his bodily function also stopping. It looked absolutely horrific. I just stopped paying attention to the cameras, and I was just sitting there reading some books that I bought while visiting Warden. One day, I looked up, and I saw Muhammad standing in the center of the room and looking straight at me. What the hell? I got up and called Dr. Frolov. He walked in, and his eyes opened wide. It's here. It's finally here. He pressed a microphone button to talk to him. What's your name? He asked him. He didn't respond, he just turned his head to the side like he was trying to get a better look. Mohammed started smiling, but in the most evil way possible. Are you Mohammed? He asked. Mohammed just kept staring. I am your master now, Frolov said. Do you understand that? He just stood there still. You will do what I tell you to do. Do you understand? Again, he just kept smiling in the camera. I noticed that he was not even standing. His feet were off the floor. He was levitating. Oh, Jesus, what is this? I said out loud. Dr. Frolov was not moving, just kept staring at him. Finally, he said, he is not listening. He's supposed to listen. Doctor started pacing. Mohammed was still just standing there. Then he started talking. Hello, doctor, he said. His voice was different. It was deep and raspy. Frolov started walking backwards until he hit the wall. I am here, like you wanted, Mohammed said. Who are you? Frolov replied. I don't know, doctor. Maybe you should. Maybe you can tell me who I am. He continued. Maybe the better question here is who you are. Are you a Dr. Frolov, or just an average pedophile? Frolov started to get nervous. What? I said. What is he talking about? He is playing with us, Frolov said. He is trying to get inside our heads. Doctor, you need to tell me what is going on here. I don't know. I don't know. Frolov started kicking and screaming. Sergei woke up and ran into the room to see what was happening. Dr. Frolov fell on his butt and started screaming and kicking. Mohammed just stood there. Hello, Sergei, he said. Sergei looked up at me in anger. Why did you tell him my name? I didn't. Sergei pulled out a gun and pointed at me. I always knew you were a terrorist lover. He said, put the gun down now, Lieutenant, I told him. He looked at Frolov and slowly put the gun away. Sergei, do you remember how your daddy died? Ha 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 ha, Mohammed said. Sergei's eyes filled with rage. That's it, I'm ending him. He started walking. I yelled at him, yelling him to stop or I am going to shoot him myself for disobeying an order of a superior officer. That made him stop. He was in pain. Your poor daddy, ha ha ha. And you were so little and helpless, ha ha ha. I told Sergei to leave. He kept looking at the screen, and his face was turning red. Sergei, leave and wait outside, I told him. He complied and left. Frolov was paralyzed by fear. Something inside of me was telling me, Ro, talk to him. I pressed a microphone button. Mohammed, is it you? I asked him. He just stood there smiling. Dr. Frolov was just laying there crying and mumbling something. I told Dr. Frolov that he needs to do something. He needs to put himself together. After all, he was the one that created this situation. But he was paralyzed. He was just frantically moving and mumbling something. Dr. Frolov, get up and do something. Mohammed started talking again. He said, I'm afraid, Captain, he's not going to be able to do anything, because he knows that I know who he truly is. Would you like me to tell you who he truly is? As you said that Dr. Frollo started screaming. I didn't want to do that. He screamed out. Muhammad started singing. It sounded super creepy. It was old song from a Soviet cartoon, my favorite cartoon from my childhood. I looked at Muhammad, and he looked at me again. Just remember, Captain, you have summoned me here, and now you're scared. You people are really pathetic. You have no courage, no morals, no honor. Sergei walked back into the building and stepped into the conversation. Muhammad said, "Oh, hello, Sergei. How was your break? I hope I didn't cause any painful memories to come back from your daddy's death." Said you never talked about his dad's death. All I know that he was an officer in Russian army, and he died while fighting in Chechnya in mid-90s. Sergei wasn't listening this time. He walked straight into the Muhammad's room, erased his gun, and shot him right in the head. It was so fast I didn't even have time to say anything. But Muhammad didn't fall down. He just looked at Sergei as blood was dripping down on his eyes. Then he moved so fast, grabbing Sergei by his throat and pinning him against the wall. Sergei was a big guy. I have no idea how Muhammad had so much strength. It was almost unhuman. But after everything I heard him say, and do I realize that he was not human anymore, he was something else. As he had a pinned against the wall, started talking to Sergei, but in a different voice. It sounded like the voice of an older man. Sergei, I will be back, okay? Don't worry about me then." His voice changed again. "That's what your daddy told you, right? Oh, that was a lie. He died like a useless sack that he was, killing innocent people." I looked at Frolov again. He was completely gone. He was just staring out in a distance, completely spaced out. I realized that he created something he couldn't control. I pulled my gun out and put it to his forehead. "You need to tell me what the hell that thing is." "Demon, it's a demon." I summoned the demon. I thought I could control him. There's an ancient way to do that, but it didn't work. You need to ask him his name. He has to tell you his name. I turned towards the microphone. "What is your name, demon? Tell me your name." Muhammad started laughing. "You people watch too many movies. I don't to tell you anything." He still had Sergei bend against the wall with just his right hand. Sergei was paralyzed by fear. "Demon, what do you want?" I asked. "What's with the insults? Stop calling me names. Demon, devil, evil. Let's look at the facts here. What evil have I ever done? You have grabbed an innocent person who was falsely accused of terrorism, kept him up for a month, which killed the poor guy's body. Can you summon me? And now you ask me what do I want? You're afraid of me. The question here is, what do you want?" Doctor curled up on the floor and started crying. I looked at him. "You knew, didn't you? This wasn't about super soldiers. This is some sick prophecy that you're trying to make come true, isn't it? You piece of shit." Frolov started crying even harder. I had to do it. God spoke to me and told me to do it. I didn't want any of this. Muhammad started laughing again. "God told you to do it. Are you sure it was God, doctor? Do you think God would talk to you after what you've done? But you know who would? Me, because you cannot walk earth after what you've done. The souls of those that you harmed, asked me to tell you to summon me, so you can pay the price for all I've started hysterically crying and screaming and begging for mercy. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. I thought, God forgive me. I was utterly confused, but what was going on? What is he talking about? I asked him. Muhammad interfered. Oh, he will not tell you. Otherwise you will shoot him right in his head. But I will. The doctor here, not a doctor. He is a murderer and a molester, with so much blood on his hands that adult Hitler himself is rolling in his grave. Experimenting with CHECHEN kids was his favorite thing. 15 kids vanished in his custody. Kids that he was supposed to take care of as their parents were killed by Russian army. But Doctor here did unspeakable things to them. So here I am. I have a little proposition for you, Captain. Your friend here is going to die unless you hand me the doctor and leave. Frolov is it true? He just kept crying. He was also gone. How does that sound, Captain? This time I remember everything Frolov was doing to Muhammad and how he treated people around him. I would like to say that I had some kind of reservations about the decision I was about to make, but Sergei was far more important to me than this guy. I told Frolov to get up. He wouldn't listen. I then grabbed his feet and started dragging him towards Muhammad's room. Muhammad let Sergei's neck go. He was unconscious. Now open the door, Captain. I opened the door and dragged Frolov in there. He was screaming and kicking and crying. As soon as I dragged them in, Muhammad zipped towards him so fast that I couldn't even see him. He already had them, but his neck bent against the wall. Now grab your friend, and remember, Captain, bad deeds do not go unpunished. Muhammad's smile was gone. I took a closer look at his face. You could tell Muhammad's body was dead. He was having first signs of body decomposition that I couldn't see in a camera before. Blood was slowly gashing from the gunshot by Sergei. It was absolutely horrific, but I pulled Sergei out of the room and closed the door. I looked away from the cameras. I didn't want to see what was going to happen in there. Sergei finally woke up. I told him to get up and I told him that we need to run. We ran outside. There was a snow blizzard coming down hard. We jumped into minivan parked outside. Keys were in there. Sergei was quiet. He didn't say a word. We took off driving and never looked back.